Hello, welcome back to Hunter Tune. Today we're going to be working on my EF hatch again, and I'm be fixing up some more stuff on it. So today, actually right after I made the last video on this car, I did find two coolant leaks that I'm going to address. The first one is right under the Vtec solenoid here. You can kind of see that this was just like a vacuum cap that was hose clamped onto this outlet hose. And it's cracked and dry rotted. Those vacuum caps that you buy, don't use them on coolant or fuel or anything with liquid. They deteriorate very easily and they can't really take a lot of pressure. So what I'm going to do instead of that is I'm just going to take a piece of hose and like a bolt to plug the other end and clamp it on both sides. Or I could run this hose into somewhere on the back of the block that's open and plugged, but I don't think there is. A lot of times when you delete like the fast idle valve or delete the idle air control valve, you can end up running where the hose came from and run it all the way up to either the thermostat housing. Down here there's sometimes a nipple that comes off of there, or you can run it up to here on the top radiator hose. So like I said, what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to just take this cap off, and I'm going to just find a piece of hose and plug it with a bolt. That's what I always do to plug stuff. It doesn't look as good, but it doesn't leak or have issues down the road. So that's what I'm gonna do. Plug that off. Also found out this Vtec solenoid wire was very loose, so I actually took the connection off and I crimped the end with my pliers and put it back on so it's a snug fit. And then there is some stuff underneath the car that I'm also going to show you. I did have two stripped out intermediate shaft bolts that I actually got away with just running a slightly longer bolt, and they tightened up, so I'm gonna just run it for now. I'm probably gonna have to take the block and put a bigger thread in it or helicoil or something like that, but for now they are tight and I reefed on them with a 3/8 ratchet, so I think they'll be okay. But it is something to note that the intermediate shaft bolts in the block are stripped, just like the exhaust bolts are stripped. So yeah, fix this coolant leak up top. I got some fresh Schaefer's 1540 oil. I got a brand new Wicks filter I'm gonna put in this thing, and then we're gonna get it fired back up, and I'm gonna get the oil pressure gauge installed, the wideband, and hopefully get it on the dyno. So I just pulled off that cap that I was talking about, and you can see it's all dry rotted, cracked, ripped. Yeah, not gonna work. All right, car back up in the air. Kind of wanted to talk a little bit about underneath the car and show you what I did. Hooked up the copper line from AutoZone to run to the oil pressure gauge. I know a lot of guys have issues with these, you know, mechanical oil pressure gauges, but I haven't really had a lot of issues with them. You just kind of got to be careful about how tight you tighten them, and just be cautious of it when make sure you don't tighten it too far, because it's just brass. So I did that, and then I fixed another coolant leak. This hose up here where the tip of the flashlight is, it runs down like that, and there's a clamp on the end. That little one, it was dripping coolant from there, so I actually just took the clamp and I moved it closer to the edge of the line, and hopefully that'll fix that leak. So now I just got to get the oil filter back on, and then I ran the line for the oil pressure gauge up into the cab already. And I fixed these intermediate shaft bolts. They were stripped out, so now those are tight. Yeah, get the black box put back on, and then the oil filter. Then I'll get back up in the car and at least hook the oil pressure gauge up so we can start and run the car. Make sure that I fix the coolant leaks and make sure that it's not leaking oil from anywhere as well. All right, just topped the car off with oil, topped it off with coolant, and you can see I fixed it with a bolt on the coolant leak up top. Hopefully we won't have any more leaks and our gauges will be working shortly. I'm gonna crawl in the car and hook this stuff up. I ran the oil pressure gauge right next to the throttle body there. Wrapped some tape around the copper so it's not rubbing on the metal. It's got the tape barrier, kind of ghetto, but for now it'll work. I'm gonna run this under the dash and then up to the gauges here, and then I gotta send power up to all of them too. And then I also gotta find a hole to run the wideband wiring through. We got the sensor in the exhaust, but we have to plug in the rest of it, which goes to the gauge. So I have to find another hole in the firewall somewhere, and I'll let you know when I get that wiring ran through. Guys, quick update on the EF. I got no more coolant leaks, and there's no oil leaks or anything like that. But it's been a couple hours, and I've been under the dash of this thing for like the last couple hours. And I've been trying to work out some wiring issues with this car. So I had the car running, and I noticed that the coolant temp on the gauge cluster wasn't coming off a cold, which this car actually does cool fairly well, but it was stuck all the way at the bottom after like 20 minutes of running. So I'm like, well, that's weird. The coolant temp sensor on the head must not be connected, because usually the wires pop off because there's like a little round terminal, like a butt connector almost, that goes on to the connection down here. So down in there, there's a spade, or like a male end of a butt, what would be a butt connector kind of thing. This sensor is the one that throws the coolant temp to the gauge cluster. The one next to it is the one that sends the coolant temp to the ECU. So I was fiddling around with, there's two hose clamps on this. One's broken, okay, whatever. So when I was logging on Hondata, I was getting coolant temp, no issues. But the gauge cluster, I want the coolant temp to work on the gauge cluster. It's funny because both of the Hondas that I own right now, the coolant temp on the gauge cluster does not work. And it kind of bugs me, because if the car is running hot, I want to know it's getting hotter than normal, and be able to shut the car off if need be. I'm not always going to have the laptop with me in the car to know what the temp is. So the light, or the cluster needle, is a good indicator to know if you're in the ballpark. So as I was fiddling around with the wiring going to there, I was fiddling with it, going to check the cluster, fiddle with it, go to check the cluster, see if it was moving or anything, and the car shut off. Well, while I was fiddling with these wires, the coolant temp to the ECU plug is a little roached. So the wiring going into this guy is about to break off. So I think that's why this was killing the car, because it's going to tell it it's, I don't know if it goes like all the way hot or all the way cold, but either way it's going to skew the fueling of the tune, and it's going to shut it right off, because the fuel is going to be so far off without the coolant temp sensor, unless you tune it without one, but I'm not going to do that. So the car just shut off. I wiggled it a little bit, and then the car, I turned it back on and it was fine. So I think there's some wiring issues on this coolant temp sensor that I have to fix. And I plugged in the reverse lights, because all this was like together in one bunch, and I'm like, maybe they mixed up the reverse lights with the coolant sensor or something like that. So I checked to see if the reverse lights worked, and they don't. So I started probing these wires, because I don't know if these are original. A lot of the wiring on this car is not original. Like, they have a resistor box plug. This is off a resistor box, this green plug, and those wires are going into the distributor, which I have not a fucking clue why they would do that. And then there's this bunch of wires down here that I don't know what does. Believe it or not, the car runs without codes. It runs code free until I wiggle this coolant temp sensor. Then I'm sure it pops the code 6. And then the Vtec wire right here is kind of screwed up, so I got to try to fix. I want to fix a lot of this shit. It sucks, because I'm not how I used to be with cars. Like, if the shit's not perfect, I don't even want to drive it. So that's one thing that kind of sucks about, you know, learning more about these cars and stuff, is you just want to have everything working before you even drive it. So, like I said, coolant leaks are fixed. All that little shit is done. I gotta fix the Vtec wire. I have to fix, I'm gonna go to the junkyard and get a new pigtail for the coolant temp on the head to the ECU. And then I have to figure out if it's the sensor, which I think it is just the sensor in the head for the cluster. I think that's why that one doesn't work, because if I send ground, or if I ground the wire, this wire right here that was going to that coolant temp to the gauge cluster wire, if I ground it, the gauge cluster goes full hot. So that's telling me that that wire goes to the cluster and the cluster works. Yeah, moving on from there, I got the gauges wired. There was no bulb in the oil pressure gauge, so I have to get a bulb for the oil pressure gauge, but this is wired in. I got it all set up in here. The wideband works and the oil pressure gauge works, but there's no light on the oil pressure gauge. And there's also no plug or anything on this boost gauge, so I don't have a lit up boost gauge, and I don't really like the way that this is. It's this plastic nylon shit that goes to this, you know, fitting to get the reading for the boost gauge. And this thing at idle, or like at wide open throttle, reads 10 vacuum, which it should read 0, so I think I'm just gonna ditch this boost gauge altogether, and I'm gonna run this vacuum line into another gauge. I might just get like a Harbor Freight job, or I don't know what kind of gauge I'll put in it, but I actually had a guy email me and said he had a ton of boost gauges he'd send me, which is weird, that now I have a problem with a boost gauge and then he emails me. But anyways, so all this works. The gauges, the car has good oil pressure. I think on a cold start I had like 75 pounds oil pressure. After I ran it for 20 minutes it had 25, and I'd rev it, it would go right to 75, so oil pressure looks good. Wideband works. Everything there is good to go. And another thing that I've been chasing my tail on is, I told you guys I would do this, try to fix the damn gauge cluster, because there was no check engine light coming on. This gauge cluster is not the one that has been in the car. The one that's normally in the car is right here. So I took this gauge cluster out and I made sure that the check engine light bulb was installed, which it was. So I'm like, oh, maybe the bulb's bad. So I swapped it with the seatbelt bulb, which is like over here to the left or something, one of these little guys. And I knew that one worked. So I swapped the bulb over to the check engine light, plug it all back in. Still no check engine light. So I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? And I still have no check engine light. And I know this cluster was good. And I still got no check engine light. I turn the key, the fuel pump primes, the main relay clicks, but no check engine light. So that's something I have not encountered before. Typically, the bulb is just yanked out, or the main relay isn't kicking on, or the ECU is not getting power, but the car runs and I can data log and the main relay clicks, the fuel pump comes on, all that stuff. But the check engine light bulb is not getting power, which is freaking weird. So I looked up some fuse diagrams and I saw that there was, one of the fuses was listed PGMFI something, flasher relay, and seatbelt control was all in one fuse. And I'm like, oh no shit, they ripped out the stock seatbelts, which were like the slidey boys, I think, where they come up and down. Maybe this was a normal seatbelt car, but I'm like, oh, maybe they just yanked the fuse for the seatbelt deal, because this car has racing harnesses in it instead. So I checked all the fuses are good. I don't know. It's weird. I've never had this issue before. The clock works. All the motor and the fan and stuff, the climate control, all that stuff works good. The flashers work. The dimmer for the gauge cluster works. All this stuff works. So it's really weird that the bulb, the check engine light, won't come on, and it's driving me nuts. And most people would be like, ah, fuck it, who cares, you know? But I'm like, dude, I want the check engine light to come on and flash off, and then I start the car and I drive, and then if the light comes on, I know something's wrong. Yeah, so that's weird. I don't know why that is. And the reverse light situation, I don't know if that's because the bulbs are burnt out for the reverse lights, or if something else is going on. Reverse lights are right there. This should be the bulb. Oh, that looks healthy. That looks healthy. Let me see if I can even get it out of here. I mean, that looks pretty healthy. The bulb doesn't appear to be broken. The socket's a little gummed up. How about this side? So that bulb, these bulbs look fine. But I suppose I could come back here and put the car in reverse and jiggle them around, see if we can get the reverse lights to come on quick. But I don't think the reverse lights work either, which I don't know why. Car's in reverse right now, keys on. I got nothing. Maybe it's the bulb. I highly doubt it. Yeah, not sure. Not sure. Maybe we could power probe it. I go power probe up at the reverse lights quick. Let's see if we can get them to turn on that way. So if I take the wiring for the reverse lights right here and I unplug them, I think all this does is complete a circuit. We don't even need to power probe it. I got no good place to put the camera. Sorry, guys. But if I connect these two together, like so, like this, it should complete the circuit and turn my frickin' reverse lights on. Nope. Still nothing. Alright, we'll try to probe it once with the power probe. I don't know what one's power and ground, but we can try it. These are like the stupidest fucking issues ever. But here I am trying to fix them. Why? I'm not sure. Alright, so we got the power probe here. I'm gonna hook this to one of them. I don't know what one would be power or ground. So that has power. And this has power. These both have power? Sorry, camera got mad. Why do these have power? That's weird. It's ground. Ground. Vtec solenoid works. Yeah, super weird. Why the fuck does this have power? I'd assume one of them has got to be a ground. Or if it's just power and it completes the circuit like I was saying. Whoa! Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's got power. Yeah, that's got power. Okay. Why? Okay, I don't understand. That's a problem with these cars, is they're getting so old and they've been through like 5,000 different people and 5,000 different people have messed with them, and it's like you don't know who did what on the car to make it not work. And this one's all tucked and stuff, and it looks nice, but it's like, man, what the fuck's next? Like I said, I checked. These are the fuses going into this would be the engine bay fuse panel. And these ones are all good from what I saw. Oh my god. I need a fucking headband on a GoPro for this shit. Make you guys seasick. There you go. Good. 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 Hazards, like. I just thought of something while I was messing around over there. So the ECU needs to send signal to the cluster, which that pin normally goes to like the connector over here. I bet you they cut that fucking connector. Let me see if I can find it. Nope. Oh, yep, there's still the connector up there. It's brown and green right up here. This connector right here is still there. Okay. But what about off of the ECU? It's gonna be pin, I'll tell you in a second. So now I'm looking on OBD1 ECU pin out right here, and I'm gonna scroll through this quick. Malfunction indicator light, 13, A13. Okay, so A13 is for the malfunction indicator lamp. A13. So A is gonna be the first plug on this side over here. I'm really sorry about making you guys seasick, but I'd fucking rather give you something than nothing kind of thing. A13. Okay, so 13 is gonna be the let's see here. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. So this orange one right here. Ha! Look at that! Fucking going to nothing. It's not going to shit. So that's why it ain't getting signal up to the cluster. Look at that. A13's going to nothing. It's just fucking chilling here. Okay. Where, oh where? Let me get right back with you guys. Well, if this thing wasn't fucking wired and wired and wired and wired. Anyways, I found the wire that goes to the check engine light. Oop. On the OBD0 side, it's on B6. So we had to go B6 to A13. So A13 to B6 right here. So I'm gonna tie these two wires together, and then hopefully we'll have a fucking check engine light. Bitch! I got a fucking check engine light. Well, now the check engine light works, and it's solid. That's a good start. The harness down there is definitely botched. It's got, it needs some help. I don't know what's going on now, why the fucking check engine light's solid. Vtec's not wired in. Just plug that in once. See if that'll... Alright, Vtec's plugged in now. I got the coolant temp plugged back in because that was unplugged. Come on. Play nice. Shut off. Shut off. Yay. Yes. I fixed it. Okay, why is it flashing at me? Oh, that's a Honda thing. We're good. Whew. All right. So now, code free once again. But lots to clean up on this car still. I'm gonna go get a new sensor for the one going to the gauge cluster. Coolant temp, I'm gonna probably just brainstorm through these schematics again on the ECU pinout and make sure like reverse lights don't go through it. The cluster, go to the gauge cluster for the temperature. Make sure that doesn't run through there for some stupid reason. Yeah. But I got 1540 oil in it. It's full of coolant. There's no more coolant leaks. It's got an oil pressure gauge that works. It's got a wideband in it. Yeah, it'll get there one of these centuries. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great night and a better tomorrow. We'll see you later.